The rain hammered against the windshield of the black Bentley as Marcus Blackwood stared through the blur, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. 3 years since he'd last seen her face, and there she stood under the flickering streetlight on Fifth Avenue, her hand protectively curved over what could only be described as a very pregnant belly. If you're loving this story and want to see more dramatic twists like this one, hit that subscribe button right now. We're so close to 10,000 subscribers, and your support means everything. Now let's dive into what happens next. Isabella, his Isabella. The woman he'd divorced because the doctors said she could never give him the heir his empire demanded. The woman whose tears he'd ignored as he signed the papers that severed their 5-year marriage. The woman who now stood pregnant in the rain, looking more beautiful and more impossible than ever. Marcus felt his world tilt on its axis. The quarterly reports scattered across his passenger seat suddenly seemed meaningless. The merger he'd been orchestrating for months faded into background noise. All that existed was her silhouette against the storm, and the questions that threatened to tear his carefully constructed reality apart. He killed the engine and stepped out into the downpour, his $1,000 suit instantly soaked. "Bella?" She turned, and even through the rain, he could see her eyes widen in shock. For a moment, neither of them moved. The city bustled around them, yellow cabs splashing through puddles, pedestrians hurrying past with umbrellas, but they might as well have been the only 2 people left in Manhattan. "Marcus." Her voice was barely audible above the storm, but it hit him like a physical blow. 3 years of silence, and his name on her lips still had the power to stop his breath. "You're—" He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't process what his eyes were telling him. Pregnant. The word hung between them like a grenade with the pin pulled out. 7 months. The math was simple, brutal, impossible. Their divorce had been finalized 3 years ago. This child wasn't his, couldn't be his. The doctors had been clear. Isabella's condition made pregnancy not just unlikely, but medically impossible. Whose is it? The question escaped before he could stop it, sharp and accusatory. Something flickered across her face. Hurt, anger, something else he couldn't identify. Does it matter? Of course it matters. The words came out harsher than he intended, but the shock was wearing off, replaced by something darker. "You were barren, Bella. The doctors said—" The doctors were wrong. She lifted her chin, that stubborn gesture he remembered so well. Turns out they can be wrong about a lot of things. A truck rumbled past, sending a wave of dirty water across the sidewalk. Isabella stepped back, her hand instinctively protecting her belly, and something twisted in Marcus's chest. Even now, even after everything, his first instinct was to protect her. "Get in the car," he said. "You're soaked." "I don't think that's a good idea." "I don't care what you think is a good idea. You're pregnant and standing in a storm." "Get in the damn car!" For a moment she looked like she might refuse. Then another wave of rain hit, and she hurried toward the Bentley. Marcus held the door open, trying not to notice how her hair still smelled like jasmine, trying not to remember how many times he'd buried his face in those dark waves. The silence inside the car was deafening. Marcus turned up the heat and handed her his jacket, watching as she wrapped it around herself. The diamond wedding ring he'd given her was gone, he noticed. Of course it was. He'd probably paid for its removal along with everything else in their divorce settlement. "Where are you living?" he asked. "Brooklyn. Prospect Heights, Brooklyn." His ex-wife, the woman who'd once been mistress of a Fifth Avenue penthouse and a house in the Hamptons, was living in Brooklyn. The woman who'd had access to unlimited credit cards and a staff of 12 was now navigating subway turnstiles with a baby on the way. "I'll drive you home." "You don't even know where—" "I'll drive you home, Isabella." His voice left no room for argument. "We have things to discuss." She was quiet for a long moment, then rattled off an address that might as well have been on another planet, for how foreign it sounded to Marcus. He'd been to Brooklyn maybe 3 times in his life, and never by choice. As they drove through the rain-slicked streets, Marcus found himself stealing glances at her profile. She looked different. Softer somehow, though maybe that was just the pregnancy. Her hair was longer than he remembered, and there were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. But she was still beautiful. Still the woman who'd walked into his office 7 years ago wearing a cheap suit, and more determination than anyone had a right to possess. "How have you been?" The question sounded absurd even as he asked it. Fine, the lie was obvious. Nothing about this was fine. Nothing about any of this made sense. Bella, don't. Her voice was sharp. Don't call me that. You lost that right when you threw me away like yesterday's newspaper. The words hit their mark. Marcus had built an empire on his ability to compartmentalize, to separate emotion from logic, to make hard choices without flinching. But sitting in this car with Isabella, watching her hands rest protectively over her belly, he felt every wall he'd built crumbling. The doctors said you were infertile, he said quietly. Multiple specialists, years of tests. I know what they said. Then how miracles happen, Marcus, even for people you've written off as defective. The bitterness in her voice cut him open. He'd never called her defective, but maybe that's how his actions had made her feel. Maybe that's exactly what he'd communicated when he'd chosen his legacy over their love. They crossed the Brooklyn Bridge in tense silence. The city lights reflected off the water below, and Marcus found himself remembering their 3rd anniversary dinner at River Cafe. Isabella had worn a blue dress that matched her eyes, and they'd talked about the future, like it was something they'd build together. Before the fertility issues, before the pressure from his board, before everything fell apart. Turn left here, Isabella directed, pulling him back to the present. The neighborhood was gentrifying but still rough around the edges. Brownstones mixed with newer developments, and Marcus had to circle twice to find parking when he finally pulled up outside her building, a converted warehouse with industrial windows and a fire escape that looked like it hadn't been inspected. Since the Clinton administration, he felt something close to panic. This is where you live. He couldn't hide his horror. It's what I can afford. She was already reaching for the door handle. Thank you for the ride. Wait. He caught her arm, felt the shock of contact like electricity. Bella, please. We need to talk about this. Talk about what? About how you decided I was broken and disposed of me. About how you chose your precious legacy over the woman who loved you. There's nothing to talk about, Marcus. But she wasn't pulling away. Despite her words, despite the hurt and anger radiating off her like heat, she wasn't pulling away. Is it mine? The question came out as barely a whisper. Her eyes flashed. You made it very clear that was impossible. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. She pulled free and got out of the car, but Marcus was faster. He caught up to her at the building's entrance, rain still falling around them like a curtain. Isabella, please. If there's even a chance of what? She whirled to face him, eyes blazing. A chance that you were wrong. A chance that all those doctors were wrong. A chance that the woman you threw away like garbage might actually be carrying your child? The words hung between them, dangerous and electric. Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs. Are you? His voice was barely audible. For a long moment she just stared at him. Rain dripped from her hair from his pooling at their feet. Then she laughed, a sound devoid of any humor. Go home, Marcus. Go back to your penthouse and your empire, and whatever ice queen you've got warming your bed these days. This baby and I are better off without you. She turned toward the building again, but this time Marcus didn't follow. He stood there in the rain, watching her disappear through the glass doors, watching the elevator carry her up and away from him. Only when her lights came on 6 floors up did he finally get back in his car. But he didn't drive away. He sat there for hours, staring up at those windows, his mind racing. 7 months pregnant. The timeline was impossible, or was it? He tried to remember their last night together, before everything fell apart. It had been bitter, angry, full of accusations and hurt feelings. But there had been that moment, that one desperate, grief-stricken moment when they'd come together like they were drowning and only had each other to hold on to. Could it be possible? Each other to hold on to. Could it be possible? Could she really be carrying his child? By the time Marcus finally drove home, it was nearly dawn. His penthouse felt cold and empty after the warmth of Isabella's presence, and he found himself standing at his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city she now called home from a distance. The next few days passed in a blur of meetings and conference calls that Marcus barely remembered. His assistant, Patricia, kept asking if he was feeling well. His board members exchanged worried glances when he lost track of conversations mid-sentence. But all he could think about was Isabella, alone in that converted warehouse carrying a child that might be his. On Thursday, he cracked. He called in favors, used connections he'd built over decades in business, and by Friday afternoon, he had Isabella's complete medical records spread across his desk. What he found there made his blood run cold. The pregnancy was real. 7 months, just like she'd said. But more than that, it was high risk. Extremely high risk. The same condition that had made doctors declare her infertile was now threatening both her life and the baby's. She needed specialized care, constant monitoring, and according to the notes from her last appointment at Brooklyn Methodist, she was refusing most of the recommended treatments because of the cost. Marcus stared at the medical reports until his eyes blurred. Isabella was in danger, real life-threatening danger, and she was facing it alone. The woman who'd once had the best healthcare money could buy was now rationing her prenatal visits because she couldn't afford them. The irony was devastating. He reached for his phone to call his personal physician when Patricia knocked on his door. "Mr. Blackwood, there's a woman here to see you. Says her name is Isabella Reeves." His heart stopped. Reeves, her maiden name. She'd gone back to her maiden name. Send her in. Isabella walked into his office like she owned it, which was remarkable given that she looked exhausted. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her pregnancy was more pronounced now that he could see her clearly in good light. But her spine was straight, her chin high, and when she met his gaze there was steel in those blue eyes. "We need to talk," she said. Marcus gestured to the chair across from his desk, the same one she'd sat in 7 years ago when she'd pitched him her crazy idea for revolutionizing his company's supply chain. He'd been impressed by her intelligence then, intrigued by her boldness. He'd also been completely unprepared for how thoroughly she'd wreck his carefully ordered world. "How did you get past security?" he asked. "I told them I was your ex-wife and I was pregnant." Apparently, that's the kind of drama they don't want to deal with in your lobby. Despite everything, Marcus almost smiled. That sounded exactly like Isabella. "You look tired," he said. "I'm tired. I'm 7 months pregnant, working 2 jobs and trying to prepare for a baby. I'm not sure I'll survive long enough to raise." Tired doesn't begin to cover it. The casual way she mentioned not surviving hit him like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" She sighed and shifted in the chair, one hand rubbing her lower back. "I assume you've already had someone dig up my medical records, so you probably know more about my condition than I do." He had the grace to look embarrassed. "Isabella, save it. I'm not here to discuss your invasion of my privacy. I'm here because I need help, and you're the only person I know with the kind of resources required." "What kind of help?" "The baby needs surgery in utero. It's experimental, expensive, and there's only one doctor in the country who performs the procedure." She met his eyes steadily. "I need $300,000. The number hung between them like a challenge. $300,000 was pocket change to Marcus, less than he'd spent on wine last year. But he could see what it cost Isabella to ask, could see the pride she was swallowing with every word. "What's the baby's condition?" he asked. "Spina bifida, but it's the kind that can be corrected with surgery before birth. The success rate is high, but only if it's done by someone who knows what they're doing." Her voice remained steady, professional, but he could hear the fear underneath. "Without the surgery, the baby will likely be paralyzed. With it, there's an 80% chance of normal mobility." Marcus felt the words hit him like physical blows. Paralyzed. Their child, and he was beginning to think of the baby as theirs, regardless of paternity, could be paralyzed if they didn't act quickly. "And you? What are your risks?" She was quiet for a long moment. "That's not your concern." "Like hell it isn't." The words came out more forcefully than he'd intended. "Isabella, if you're asking me for help, I need to know what we're dealing with." "We?" She raised an eyebrow. "There's no we, Marcus. There's you and there's me asking for a loan. That's it." But even as she said it, even as she tried to maintain that professional distance, Marcus could see through the cracks in her armor. She was scared, terrified, and despite everything that had happened between them, despite all the hurt and anger, she'd still come to him when she needed help. "The risks to you," he pressed. "What aren't you telling me?" Isabella closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them, Marcus saw a vulnerability there that made his chest tighten. "The surgery itself is dangerous for me. My body is already struggling with this pregnancy, and the stress of fetal surgery could trigger complications. Hemorrhaging, organ failure, cardiac arrest." She paused. There's approximately a 15% chance I won't survive the procedure. The statistics hit Marcus like a sledgehammer. 15%, more than 1 in 10. Those were terrible odds for something as precious as Isabella's life. And if you don't have the surgery, the baby will almost certainly be born with severe disabilities, and my condition will continue to deteriorate. I might not survive the birth anyway. Marcus felt the room spinning around him. No matter what choice they made, Isabella was in mortal danger. The woman he'd thrown away 3 years ago might die, and their last conversation would have been bitter words in the rain. 300,000, he said quietly. Yes, and after that? After the surgery. After that, you never have to see or hear from us again. The promise should have been reassuring. Instead, it felt like another door slamming shut. Another ending to a story that had already had too many. Is it mine? He asked again, his voice barely a whisper. Isabella closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were bright with unshed tears. Does it matter? Yes, he said simply. It matters more than anything. She was quiet for so long that Marcus began to think she wouldn't answer at all. Then, so softly he almost missed it, she whispered, I don't know. The honesty of it hit him harder than any lie could have. She didn't know. After everything they'd been through, after all the specialists and tests and heartbreak, she genuinely didn't know if the child she was carrying was his. The timing, he began. I know what the timing suggests. But Marcus, I've been with someone else, after our divorce. If this baby is yours, it would mean the doctors were wrong about everything. Not just wrong, spectacularly wrong. And if they were wrong about my fertility, what else were they wrong about? What other chances did we throw away based on their certainty? The questions hung in the air between them, unanswerable and devastating. Marcus found himself thinking about those last months of their marriage, the parade of specialists and second opinions, the hope that died a little more each time someone confirmed what they already knew. Isabella couldn't have children. Their marriage would produce no heir. His board had made their position clear. The Blackwood legacy required continuation, and if Isabella couldn't provide that, perhaps it was time to consider other options. He'd chosen the company over his wife, chosen a future built on stone and steel over the woman who'd been his heart and soul for 5 years. And now she was sitting across from his desk, pregnant and beautiful, and possibly carrying the child he'd convinced himself could never exist. Who is he? Marcus asked. The other man. Something flickered across Isabella's face. Guilt, maybe, or sorrow. His name is David. He's a teacher. A good man. Do you love him? The question seemed to surprise her. We're not together anymore. Haven't been for months. That doesn't answer my question. She looked out the window at the city sprawling below them. I tried to love him. He deserved to be loved. But some hearts only have one setting, Marcus. Some hearts can't be reset, no matter how badly you want them to be. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they wanted to cross. Marcus felt something loosening in his chest. Some knot he'd carried for 3 years finally beginning to untangle. I'll pay for the surgery, he said. Relief flooded her face. Thank you. I'll sign whatever paperwork you need. Set up a payment plan. No paperwork. No payment plan. Just let me help. Marcus, and I want to be involved. In the pregnancy, the surgery, everything. Now the wariness was back. That's not necessary. It's not negotiable. He leaned forward, fixing her with the look that had intimidated CEOs and world leaders. If there's even a chance this child is mine, I'm not walking away again. I won't make that mistake twice. And if the child isn't yours? And if the child isn't yours? The question hit him in a place he wasn't prepared for. But as he looked at Isabella, really looked at her, seeing past the hurt and pride to the woman underneath, he realized the answer had been there all along. Then I'll still be here, he said quietly. Because I never stopped loving you, Bella. Not for 1 day in 3 years. The tears she'd been holding back finally spilled over. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking, and Marcus was around the desk in seconds. He knelt beside her chair, his hands hovering uncertainly in the air. Can I? He asked. She nodded, still crying, and he pulled her into his arms. She felt different than he remembered. Fuller, softer, but still unmistakably Isabella. Still the woman who'd taught him what it meant to love someone more than yourself. I'm so scared, she whispered against his shoulder. I know, but you're not alone anymore. Whatever happens, you're not alone. They held each other in the late afternoon light streaming through his office windows, and for the first time in 3 years, Marcus felt like he could breathe again. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of medical appointments and consultations. Marcus insisted on the best of everything. Dr. Rebecca Chen, the country's leading specialist in fetal surgery, flew in from Johns Hopkins. Their suite was reserved at Mount Sinai. Every test, every scan, every precaution money could buy was arranged and paid for without question. Through it all, Isabella maintained her careful distance. She accepted his help with the pregnancy, but refused to let him back into her heart. They were partners in this endeavor, she made clear, nothing more. But Marcus caught moments. When she laughed at something Dr. Chen said, when she unconsciously reached for his hand during a difficult ultrasound, when she fell asleep in the waiting room and he covered her with his jacket, that gave him hope. During one particularly tense consultation, Dr. Chen laid out the surgery timeline with brutal honesty. The procedure needs to happen within the next 2 weeks. Any later, and the risks to both mother and child increase exponentially. Isabella sat perfectly still, processing the information with the same composure she'd once shown in boardroom negotiations. But Marcus could see the fear in the tight lines around her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly when she thought no one was looking. After the appointment, they found themselves in Marcus's car in the hospital parking garage, neither ready to face the world outside. 2 weeks, Isabella said quietly. We'll get through it. Will we? She turned to look at him, and Marcus was struck by how young she looked, despite everything they'd been through. Marcus, I need you to understand something. If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen. If something happens, she continued firmly, I need to know that you'll be okay. That you won't blame yourself. That you'll move on and find happiness somewhere else. The request broke something inside Marcus's chest. Isabella, I can't promise that. You have to, because the guilt will destroy you, and I can't live with that. I can't die with that. Then don't die. The words came out more forcefully than he'd intended. Fight. For yourself, for the baby, for the chance we might have to build something together again. She studied his face in the dim garage lighting. Do you really believe we could have that? After everything? I have to believe it. It's the only thing keeping me sane. Isabella reached across the console and took his hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was steady. Then I'll fight. But Marcus, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that... No, he brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. No worst-case scenarios. No backup plans. We're going to walk into that operating room, and we're going to walk out together, all 3 of us. The surgery was scheduled for the following Tuesday. The weekend before, Marcus found himself pacing his penthouse like a caged animal, unable to focus on anything except the clock that seemed to be moving both too fast and too slow. He'd rearranged his entire life around this moment, cleared his calendar for the next month, put Patricia in charge of day-to-day operations, even drafted a letter of resignation from the company he'd built from nothing. On Sunday evening, his phone rang. Isabella's name lit up the screen, and Marcus answered before the first ring had finished. Hey, her voice was soft, tired. Are you busy? Never too busy for you. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I can't sleep. And I keep thinking about things I should have said, should have done differently. Marcus was already reaching for his keys. I'm coming over. You don't have to. I'm coming over, Bella. We can talk about whatever you need to talk about. 20 minutes later, Marcus was standing in Isabella's small apartment, struck once again by how different her life had become. The space was warm and lived in, filled with books and plants and the kind of personal touches that had been missing from their sterile penthouse existence. Isabella was curled up on the couch in an oversized sweater, her hands wrapped around a mug of herbal tea. She looked impossibly young and fragile, and Marcus felt an overwhelming urge to protect her from everything the world might throw at them. I've been thinking about our wedding day, she said as he sat beside her. The first one. Do you remember what you said in your vows? Marcus remembered every word. I promise to love you through every season of our lives, through abundance and want, through joy and sorrow, through whatever challenges the future might bring, and I promise to be your partner in all things, to support your dreams even when I didn't understand them. To build a life with you that would honor both of our hopes for the future. They sat in silence for a moment, both lost in memories of promises made and broken. We were so young, Isabella continued, so sure that love was enough to overcome anything. Maybe it is. Maybe we just forgot how to fight for it. She turned to look at him, her blue eyes searching his face. If we get through this, if we both survive and the baby is healthy, what then? What do we do with a second chance we never expected to have? Marcus considered the question carefully. 3 years ago, he would have had an answer ready. Plans and contingencies and corporate strategies for managing their personal life. Now he realized he didn't want to plan their future. He wanted to live it. We take it one day at a time, he said finally. We learn to trust each other again. We figure out how to be parents. We try to build something better than what we had before. And if the baby isn't yours, if the paternity test shows that David is her father, the question still hurt, but not the way it once had. Then we figure that out too. Because, Bella, I'm not in love with the idea of having an heir. I'm in love with you. And if loving you means loving a child who isn't biologically mine, then that's what I'll do. Isabella started crying then. Not the angry tears of their earlier confrontations, but soft, grateful tears that spoke of hope being rekindled. I was so angry with you, she whispered. For so long I was just consumed with rage. At you, at the doctors, at the whole situation. But somewhere along the way the anger turned to grief, and then the grief turned to acceptance. And now I'm terrified that I'm falling in love with you all over again, and I don't know if my heart can survive losing you twice. Marcus set down her tea mug and pulled her into his arms, marveling at how perfectly she still fit against his chest. You're not going to lose me. Not again. Not ever. You can't promise that. Watch me. He tilted her chin up so he could look directly into her eyes. Isabella Marie Reeves, I promise you that whatever happens tomorrow, whatever the surgery brings, whatever challenges we face in the future, I will never voluntarily walk away from you again. You'll have to kick me out if you want to be rid of me. She laughed through her tears. That might be more difficult than you think. I'm not as strong as I used to be. You're stronger. You survived losing everything and built a new life from nothing. You're carrying our child despite impossible odds. You came to me for help, even though I gave you every reason to hate me. Marcus brushed her tears away with his thumbs. You're the strongest person I know, Bella. And tomorrow that strength is going to carry all three of us through. They spent the rest of the evening talking about everything and nothing. Memories from their marriage, hopes for their daughter, fears about the surgery, dreams for the future. When Isabella finally fell asleep, curled against his side, Marcus stayed awake watching her breathe, memorizing the peaceful expression on her face. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. But tonight they were together. Tonight they were a family again, if only temporarily. And for the first time in 3 years that felt like enough. The morning of the surgery dawned grey and drizzling, as if the weather was reflecting the anxiety that had settled over everything like a shroud. Marcus had barely slept, spending the pre-dawn hours staring at the ceiling and trying to quiet the voice in his head that kept whispering about everything that could go wrong. He picked Isabella up at 6 a.m. sharp, finding her already dressed and waiting in the lobby of her building. She looked pale but determined, carrying a small overnight bag and the kind of steely resolve that had first attracted him to her years ago. The drive to Mount Sinai was quiet. Marcus reached for Isabella's hand as they navigated the morning traffic, and she didn't pull away. Her fingers were ice-cold despite the car's warmth, but her grip was steady. Nervous? He asked. Terrified, she admitted, but also ready. I can't live in this limbo anymore, Marcus. Whatever happens today, at least we'll know. The preoperative preparations were a blur of paperwork and medical procedures. Blood work, vital signs, consent forms that outlined every possible complication in brutal detail. Through it all, Dr. Chen maintained her calm professionalism, but Marcus could see the underlying tension in her movements. This surgery was as much a risk for her reputation as it was for Isabella's life. The procedure will take approximately 4 hours, Dr. Chen explained as they prepared Isabella for surgery. We'll be monitoring both mother and baby continuously, and Mr. Blackwood, you'll be able to wait in the surgical family room where we'll update you regularly. 4 hours. Marcus tried to wrap his mind around sitting helplessly for 4 hours while the two people he loved most in the world were opened up on an operating table. As they wheeled Isabella toward the surgical suite, she caught Marcus's hand one last time. "I love you," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "Whatever happens, I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. Not for 1 day in 3 years." The confession hit Marcus like a physical blow. After everything, the divorce, the anger, the years of silence, she'd never stopped loving him. "I love you too," he managed. "Both of you. Come back to me, Bella, come back to us." And then she was gone, disappearing behind the sterile doors of the operating room, while Marcus was left alone with his fear and his prayers and the terrible, wonderful weight of hope. The surgical waiting room became Marcus's world for the next 4.5 hours. He paced, he sat, he called Patricia to cancel every meeting for the next month. He tried to read magazines that might as well have been written in ancient Greek for all the sense they made. Other families came and went, some with good news, others with the kind of devastating silence that spoke louder than words. Dr. Chen emerged periodically with updates. "Everything is proceeding as expected. Both patients are stable. We've successfully accessed the fetal surgical site." Each update brought a moment of relief, followed immediately by renewed anxiety. It was during the 4th hour that everything went wrong. Marcus was staring out the window at the city below when an alarm started blaring somewhere in the surgical wing. He watched medical personnel rushing down hallways, saw the controlled urgency that meant someone was fighting for their life. His phone rang, Dr. Chen's number. "Mr. Blackwood, I need you to come to Surgical Suite 4 immediately." The words hit him like bullets. "What's wrong?" "Just come now." Marcus ran through the hospital corridors, his heart hammering against his ribs as he tried not to think about what he might find. When he reached the surgical suite, Dr. Chen was waiting outside, still in her surgical scrubs but with her mask pulled down. Her face was grim. "What happened?" Marcus demanded. "Isabella started hemorrhaging during the procedure. Massive blood loss. We've managed to stabilize her, but—" Dr. Chen paused. "Mr. Blackwood, she's in critical condition. The next few hours will determine whether she survives." The world tilted dangerously around Marcus. "And the baby?" "The surgery on the baby was successful. We completed the spinal repair, and early indicators suggest excellent results. But we had to deliver her immediately due to Isabella's condition. She's premature but breathing on her own." Marcus felt like he was drowning. Success and catastrophe, wrapped together in a package he couldn't begin to process. Their daughter was alive and likely healthy. Isabella was dying. "Can I see her?" "She's unconscious and will be for several hours. But yes, you can see her, and Mr. Blackwood. You should also meet your daughter." The NICU was a world of soft lights and gentle beeping, filled with tiny warriors fighting battles that would determine their entire futures. Dr. Chen led him to an incubator near the window, where the smallest person Marcus had ever seen lay surrounded by monitors and tubes. 4 pounds 2 ounces, Dr. Chen said softly. Small but strong. The surgical repair was textbook perfect. She should develop completely normal mobility. Marcus stared down at his daughter. Because she was his daughter, he knew it with absolute certainty now, and felt his heart break open in the most wonderful and terrible way. She was impossibly tiny, her skin translucent and delicate, but her little chest rose and fell with determined rhythm. When he spoke to her, she turned toward his voice. "Hey there, little fighter," he whispered. "I'm your dad. And your mom is. Your mom is going to be fine. She has to be fine because we need her." But even as he said the words, Marcus wasn't sure he believed them. Isabella was fighting for her life 3 floors up, and there was nothing he could do but wait and hope and pray to a God he'd barely acknowledged since childhood. Isabella's room in the ICU was a maze of machines and monitors, each one tracking a different aspect of her struggle for survival. She looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, dwarfed by the technology keeping her alive. Her face was pale as paper, her breathing assisted by a ventilator that pushed air into her lungs with mechanical persistence. Marcus pulled a chair beside her bed and took her hand, careful not to disturb the IV lines running into her arm. Her skin was cool to the touch, but he could feel her pulse, weak but steady beneath his fingers. "The surgery went perfectly," he told her, even though she couldn't hear him. "Our daughter is beautiful, Bella. She's small, but she's fighting, just like her mother. The doctors say the spinal repair was successful. She's going to walk, she's going to run, she's going to be everything we dreamed of." The monitors continued their electronic symphony, but Isabella remained motionless. A nurse came in periodically to check her vitals and adjust her medications, speaking in the hushed tones reserved for the gravely ill. As night fell, Marcus found himself talking to Isabella about everything and nothing. He told her about the apartment he'd already bought in her building, because he couldn't bear the thought of being far from them. He told her about the nursery he'd had designed, complete with a reading nook where she could tell their daughter stories. He told her about the ring he'd commissioned, not to replace her original wedding ring, but to complement it, a symbol of their second chance. Mostly he told her he loved her, over and over, like a prayer or an incantation, as if the words themselves could call her back to him. "I know I failed you before," he whispered into the darkness. "I chose everything else over you, the company, my reputation, what other people thought I needed. But I understand now that none of that matters. You and our daughter, you're my legacy. You're everything that counts." Sometime after midnight, Isabella's blood pressure started dropping. Alarms began sounding, and suddenly the room filled with medical personnel. Marcus was pushed back against the wall as they worked frantically over her, their voices calm but urgent, as they fought to stabilize her failing systems. "She's crashing," someone said. Marcus felt the words like physical blows. Crashing, medical terminology for dying. Isabella was dying, and there was nothing he could do but watch helplessly as they tried to save her. The medical team worked for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Marcus watched them fight for Isabella's life with the same desperation he felt, watched them refuse to give up, even when her vital signs continued to decline. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the crisis passed. Her blood pressure stabilized. Her heart rate strengthened. The alarm stopped screaming, and the frantic energy in the room shifted to cautious relief. "She's stable," Dr. Martinez announced, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool temperature. "She's stable." Marcus sank back into his chair, his hands shaking as he reached for Isabella's again. They'd almost lost her. For a few terrible minutes, he'd come within heartbeats of losing the woman he loved more than his own life. "The next 24 hours will be critical," Dr. Martinez continued. "But she's a fighter, Mr. Blackwood. She's made it this far." Isabella woke up slowly, like someone swimming up from the bottom of a deep, dark pool. The first thing she became aware of was the steady beeping of monitors. The second was the feeling of someone holding her hand. "Marcus?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper, rough from the ventilator tube that had been removed hours earlier. "I'm here." His voice was thick with exhaustion and relief. "I'm right here." She turned her head slightly and saw him sitting beside her bed, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive shirt wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. But when he smiled at her, it was like the sun coming up. "The baby?" she asked. "Perfect, beautiful, fighting like her mother." Marcus brought her hand to his lips, pressing gentle kisses to her knuckles. "The surgery was a complete success, Bella. The spinal repair was textbook. She's going to be fine." Relief flooded through Isabella so powerfully she started crying. "Can I see her?" "As soon as you're stronger. She's in the NICU, but she's breathing on her own and getting stronger every hour." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both processing everything that had happened. Then Isabella spoke again, her voice still weak but determined. "Marcus, there's something I need to tell you. About the baby's father." His heart clenched, but he forced his voice to remain steady. "Bella, it doesn't matter anymore." "It does matter, because I lied to you." She took a shaky breath. "She's yours. She was always yours. There was never any doubt." The words hit him like a thunderclap. "What?" "I know exactly when she was conceived. It was our last night together before you asked for the divorce, and David." She closed her eyes briefly. "There was never a David. I made him up because I was angry and hurt, and I wanted you to feel the same uncertainty I'd felt when you threw us away." Marcus stared at her, processing the confession. "There was no other man?" "There was no other man. There was never anyone else, Marcus. Not for 3 years. Not ever." The tears were flowing freely now. "She's your daughter. Our daughter. And I'm sorry I made you doubt it even for a moment." The revelation should have made him angry. She'd lied to him, made him question his own child's paternity when she'd known the truth all along. But looking at Isabella now, exhausted, vulnerable, having just nearly died bringing their daughter into the world, all Marcus felt was overwhelming love and relief. "Why?" he asked gently. "Because I wanted you to love her for herself, not because she was yours. Because I was terrified you'd only want us back because we could give you an heir." She squeezed his hand weakly. "I needed to know that you'd choose us, not just claim us." Marcus understood then, after the way their marriage had ended, after he'd made it clear that her value to him was tied to her ability to bear children. Of course she'd needed proof that his love was unconditional. "I did choose you," he said quietly. "Before I knew she was mine, I told you I'd be here regardless." "I meant that, Bella. I will always mean that." "I know. That's why I knew it was safe to tell you the truth." Marcus leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Our daughter," he said softly. "We have a daughter." "We have a daughter," Isabella agreed, smiling through her tears. The next few weeks passed in a blur of recovery and adjustment. Isabella grew stronger each day, though the doctors warned that it would be months before she was completely back to normal. Their daughter, whom they'd finally named Hope Elizabeth Blackwood, graduated from the NICU to a regular nursery room, and then, finally, home. Marcus had bought out the apartment next to Isabella's and had it converted into a nursery and family space. He'd also arranged for a full-time nurse to help during Isabella's recovery, though she protested that it wasn't necessary. "How you almost died," Marcus reminded her gently, as he helped her settle into the rocking chair they'd placed beside Hope's crib. "Let me take care of you for once." The first night home with Hope was a revelation. Marcus had intellectually understood that babies required constant attention, but the reality was overwhelming. Every sound Hope made sent him into a panic. Was she breathing? Was she too hot? Too cold? Hungry? Uncomfortable? Isabella watched his frantic hovering with amusement. "She's fine, Marcus. Babies make noise. It's what they do. How do you know what all these different cries mean?" "I don't. I'm learning as we go, just like you are." By 3 a.m. both of them were exhausted, but strangely exhilarated. Hope had finally settled into sleep after what felt like hours of fussing, and Marcus and Isabella found themselves sitting on the couch together, sharing a cup of tea in the quiet apartment. "This is harder than running a multinational corporation," Marcus said, "but more rewarding." He looked at her, hair mussed from sleep, wearing an old t-shirt and pajama pants more beautiful than she'd ever been in designer gowns, and felt his heart swell with love, infinitely more rewarding. 2 months after Hope's birth, Marcus finally asked the question that had been burning in his heart since Isabella's confession in the hospital. They were in the nursery he'd created in his penthouse. He'd bought out the entire floor below his own and had it converted into family space, complete with nursery, playroom, and Isabella's art studio. Hope was sleeping peacefully in her crib, her tiny chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of new life. "Marry me," Marcus said suddenly. Isabella looked up from the baby clothes she was folding. "What? Marry me again, properly this time." He dropped to one knee beside the crib, pulling out a ring box he'd been carrying for weeks. "I know we're technically already remarried in every way that matters, but I want to do it right. I want to make promises I'll actually keep this time." The ring was different from her first one, simpler, more elegant, with a diamond that caught the nursery's soft light and threw rainbows across the wall. But nestled beside it was her original wedding ring, the one she'd told him she'd never been able to bring herself to sell. "I had them designed to go together," Marcus explained. "The new one represents our second chance, but I wanted you to have the original back too. Our history, our future, all of it together." Isabella stared at the rings, tears already starting to flow. "Marcus, I love you, Isabella. I love our daughter. I love the life we're building together, and I want to spend every day for the rest of my existence proving to you that you can trust me with your heart again." She was crying in earnest now, but these were happy tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, of course, yes." As Marcus slipped both rings onto her finger, Isabella marveled at how right they looked together. The original ring, with all its history of young love and broken promises. The new ring, representing hard-won wisdom and second chances. Together they told the complete story of their relationship, the pain and the joy, the failures and the triumphs, the love that had survived everything thrown against it. They were married 6 months later, in the same small church where they'd had their first wedding, but this ceremony was different in every way that mattered. This time, there were no board members calculating the value of potential heirs, no family members making pointed comments about biological clocks and corporate succession. Just Isabella in a simple ivory dress that accommodated her still recovering body, Marcus in his best suit, and Hope sleeping peacefully in her carrier, surrounded by the few people who truly mattered to them. When the minister asked Marcus if he took Isabella to be his wife, for better or worse, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, he looked directly into her eyes and said, "I do, without conditions, without reservations, forever." And when Isabella made the same vows, her voice steady and sure, Marcus knew that this time they would get it right. The reception was small and intimate, held in Marcus's penthouse with views of the city sprawling below them. As they danced to their song, the same one they danced to 8 years ago but with deeper meaning now, Marcus whispered in Isabella's ear, "Any regrets?" "Just one," she said, then smiled at his concerned expression. "I regret that it took us so long to find our way back to each other." Marcus spun her gently, careful not to wake Hope, who was sleeping in her carrier nearby. "We found our way. That's all that matters. What about your board? Your legacy? The empire you built? My legacy is sleeping in that carrier. My legacy is the woman in my arms. My legacy is the love we're going to build together, the family we're going to raise, the life we're going to share." He pulled her closer. "Everything else is just business." As if she'd heard her parents talking about her, Hope chose that moment to wake up and let out a small cry. Marcus and Isabella moved toward her together, a perfectly synchronized team, and as Isabella picked up their daughter and Marcus wrapped his arms around them both, he realized that he finally understood what true wealth looked like. It wasn't measured in stock prices or real estate holdings. It wasn't about corporate empires or family legacies written in stone. True wealth was this moment, this family, this love that had survived loss and doubt, and the worst kinds of pain to emerge stronger than ever. Hope looked up at both of them with serious dark eyes, then gave them what was definitely her first real smile. And as the three of them stood there in the golden light of sunset, streaming through the penthouse windows, Marcus, Isabella, and the daughter who had brought them back together, they were surrounded by the kind of happiness that money couldn't buy, but love could build. Later that night, as they tucked Hope into her crib and prepared for bed in the master suite Marcus had redesigned to accommodate their new life together, Isabella turned to him with a question. "What happens now?" "Now we live," Marcus said simply. "We raise our daughter, we love each other, we build something beautiful together. And if we face challenges, if things get difficult again?" Marcus pulled her close, marveling at how perfectly she still fit in his arms. "Then we face them together. That's what marriage really means, Bella. Not just the good times, but the promise that whatever comes, we'll handle it as a team." Isabella smiled and settled against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Outside, New York continued its relentless pace, but inside their home, time felt suspended, sacred. They had been given a second chance that neither had believed possible, and they weren't going to waste a single moment of it. As they drifted off to sleep, Hope's soft breathing coming through the baby monitor, Marcus whispered one final promise into the darkness. "I love you, Isabella Blackwood. Today, tomorrow, and for all the days we have left." "I love you too," she whispered back. "All of us do." And in that moment, Marcus Blackwood, billionaire, corporate titan, master of the universe, knew that he was finally, truly, completely home.